Hello, welcome to prospecting principle number 6, which is sharing and sorting. This is on knowledge base 4.5.6. So, the idea behind this principle is something that I think is common sense. Most of us that have been in sales for a while probably would agree with this, though I think it's like a lot of things, it's easy to understand, but it's more difficult to do. So, it's simple, but not easy. And the idea behind it is that the attitude you want to have is that what I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk them into it. I don't want to try to make someone do something that they don't want to do, regardless of what it is that you're selling. And the idea is not to convince, not to talk them into it, for sure not to exaggerate. Don't bend the truth. In fact, if anything, it's a different principle. But if anything, you want to under exaggerate the benefits just slightly. That's a really powerful technique. And don't pester, don't cajole, don't trick. The flip side is also don't be arrogant, don't be too aloof. Okay, it's that fine balance. So instead, what you do is you share with the person your offering, your business opportunity, your products, whatever the case may be. Then do a really good job of answering their questions. And I do think the answering questions is interesting. Is you want to make when you're handling objections, answering questions, addressing concerns, whatever you want to call it. The idea is that you give them a full, complete answer, but never make it seem like you are again exaggerating or the vibe isn't that you're talking them into it. Again, that doesn't mean you're aloof and arrogant and cocky. That's not the right answer either, but it's this vibe of I'm gonna answer your questions. I'll even answer them in the light of being in a positive way, but not exaggerated. And then the next step is then you invite them to take advantage of it, which is another step people forget, and that is actually ask them to become your client, ask them to buy your product or service, like actually make that statement. So are you ready to go? Based on what you've seen, et cetera. I'm not going to get into what those closing things are, but there is a point where you should do that. And then you just sort them, right? The ones that say yes, you move to the yes step. The ones that say no, you very politely, very professionally, without making anyone feel bad, you pack up your bags and go. Always leave the door open, but you pack your bags and go, and then you don't pester them, you don't bug them. And then there's also the ones that are in between. The ones, and that's a broad range. These are people that are probably not really interested, but they're open to some follow up, or people that are very interested, but they're not ready to say yes yet. Okay. But you basically sort them in those three kind of categories. And the attitude really in your mind is you're going to offer your offering to as many people as you can. And then, present it, ask questions, ask them to take advantage of it. And then based on their response, then you go either, and the key really here is that in that last step. It's based on their response, you have a particular behavior. What you want to do or try to do is not attach too much emotional value to the outcome. Right? Like Nick Murray says, it's not what you say, but how many people you say it to. And that's kind of where this comes into play. It's like imagine you are a factory or a piece of equipment in the factory, and this equipment its job is to sort the red widgets from the blue widgets. And probably 9 out of 10 widgets that come down the assembly line up to your machine are blue. But then roughly 1 in 10, it's not exactly every 10, but roughly the ratio, maybe sometimes it's 1 in 20, but the next time it's 1 in 5. But average, it's 1 in 10 is blue or red, whatever, you get the point. So the machine doesn't have an emotional value. It doesn't say, oh my gosh, there's another red, another red, another red. Oh, finally a blue one, yay! Oh, another red, another red. It's like Data from Star Trek or Spock from Star Trek, where you're almost really just a machine. And this person says no, this person says maybe, this person says yes. And again, I know that this is kind of common sense, and we've all heard some variation of this principle in any kind of sales, but you really have to do that, right? What most of us in fact do is we take it much too personally. We take maybe I didn't give the right presentation, maybe they don't like me, maybe I didn't handle objection, maybe I was too needy, or maybe I was not open enough. And the thing is, that may be true. That actually may be true, right? But you can't change it right now. It's already over. So sure, there's part of you that does need to dissect a little bit about how your presentation was, how you're offering, your prospecting steps, and evaluate that and try to improve. But there's an old saying in sales as well, which is that you can't give the wrong presentation to the right person. I don't think it's 100% true, but there is some truth to that. If someone's not interested at all, no matter how you say it, no matter what you say, they're not going to say yes. And if someone's really, really interested and wants what you have, you'd have to really screw it up for them to say no. Like you have to be like a jerk, really screw. Now, there is a segment that's in between where, especially if you're competing with someone else who's offering a very similar service, then the differentiator may be you. That can happen. So I'm not saying completely disregard that, but you can always get better at that. But now beating yourself up after it's over, even if you did screw up, doesn't help anyway, right? Maybe the machine, going back to this widget, maybe the machine is screwing it up. Maybe sometimes it's picking a blue one when it's really red. Okay, but it's already been picked. It's over. So now we can tweak the machine. But the machine is not going to get overly emotional and beat itself to death because it picked the wrong widget color. It'll just improve it. Okay. The other way, another analogy, it's very similar, or metaphor, or story, parable, is shucking oysters, right? If you're sitting on the side of a pier and you've got buckets and buckets of oysters, and your goal is to try to find pearls. So you use your little knife and you shuck the oyster, open it up, and if it's not a pearl, you just throw the oyster back in the water. If it is, you take out the pearl, put it in this other bucket, and then you throw the oyster into the water. Well, you can't beat yourself up if 19 out of 20 of the oysters don't have a pearl in it. And you also, you don't grab one after you've opened one up and there's no pearl in it. You don't say, oh, geez, man, maybe if I would have shucked it differently, or maybe if I'd have been better at picking them out of the original bucket, or perhaps if I rubbed it a little bit, it'll turn into a pearl. No, it is what it is, right? Its nature is already its nature, regardless of how you open it, which ones you choose, or what you do after the fact. And that's the way you have to look at this business. And again, as I said a moment ago, sure, there are some people in that medium range between no and yes that might or might not say no or yes based on you. But for the most part, if you're selling a car, they either like the car or they don't, right? So unless you really, really screw it up, they're probably not going to say yes. Sorry, they're not going to say no if they want it, just because maybe you're not the greatest personality in the world. So that's where the oysters comes in. You just have to go through a lot of oysters. That's really the key. And I mean, there's a ton of other analogies you can use. Pulling a slot machine. If someone told you that this is a special slot machine and every 1,000th pull will give you $1,000, but 999 pulls out of the slot machine won't. Now, it's not exactly one. It's the average is 1 in 1,000, but you can't count to 1,000 and know that the 1,000's one. But the average is, right. But you have to sit there and do it over and over, and you can't skip the steps. You just have to pull over and over again the slot machine. Well, when you pull it 999 times and there's no money coming out, are you going to get all frustrated and mad? No, right? All you can do is go back and pull the lever anymore. That's the sharing and sorting. Again, we're dealing with people, so sometimes it's not quite as mechanical as the oysters or as the factory analogy or as the one-armed bandit analogy. But the sentiment is still true. It's really, you have to think is, I'm just going to share it. And here's the other thing you got to remember. This is important. This is not really written here in the knowledge base, but you're limited by time. And this is a key in this principle. You're limited by time and also emotional energy. If we had unlimited time, like if you could somehow pause time, except yourself, then you could spend a lot of time on any one given person and try to convince and persuade. But understand, every time that if you're spending more time than you should on any one prospect that is not going to say yes, but you feel like you try to overcome every objection and you go super deep into it and you just over and over and over again. The problem is that you're taking time away from the next prospect, right? So part of it is that you want to get to sharing as quickly to the next sharing as quickly as you can. People forget that. It's just like, depending upon what product or service a person is selling, but me being in financial services, I teach my guys this all the time is, look, I want you to do business with every size account as you're learning. And when you get to 50 or get to 100 accounts, but there comes a point in your career, it might be a few years into, comes a point in your career where you don't want to just do business with everyone, especially lower dollar amounts. You just got to be realistic about it. You want to help the world, but if all you're ever doing is Roth IRAs for $100 a month or $500 a month or $10,000 rollovers, because you're operating in that income dynamic, it's good for a while and you should do that. But if you've been in the business 5 years, you've got a lot of clients, but all the clients are small. You're never going to be successful long term. And what you have to remember is that you're leaving other money on the table, or it's the time you're spending with the person that's doing $100 a month. It takes you that much longer to get the guy 17 prospects later who's got $1 million to invest. Okay, because there's plenty of people that will help him at $100 a month. So whether it's the dollar amount or not, my point just is that if you spend too much time on the answering questions, cajoling, following up, and over and over and over again, because you don't have limited time and you don't have unlimited emotional fortitude, we don't. You're it takes you that much longer to get the right prospect. The faster, you've heard it before, the faster you can say no, the faster you can get a yes. And that really is true. So the idea, again, in summary, is in your mind, it's just a mental principle, is that your goal is to share, and then based on their response, you sort them and move on quickly to the next one, and don't have too much of emotional baggage, even on the yeses. Don't get too crazy, okay? Because they probably would have said yes to everybody, right, that was offering your service, or many of them. So there you go. Share and sort. May you have long days and pleasant nights.